those pools just in case situation's rough. Meanwhile, in Brazil, they are still dealing with one of the worst situations with COVID in the world right now. And we talk about this periodically, partially because for some reason, it just doesn't really get covered in the United States how bad it is there. We had this brief period where people acknowledged how bad the situation was in India about a month or two ago. But Brazil is really suffering. Their death toll just passed 500,000, the official death toll. God knows what it actually is. We passed 600,000. In India, where it's also really bad, deaths may range from 600,000 to as many as 4.2 million. We certainly don't know now. We might not know for a long time. But in Brazil, it's really bad. Nearly 18 million people have been infected. They're averaging about 73,000 new cases and 2,000 deaths a day. I believe the last daily reporting was over 2,300 deaths, which is still terrible. Yes, 2,301, I think it was on Saturday. Only about 11% of residents are believed to be fully vaccinated, so they're apparently outdoing Japan, to reference one of our recent stories. And there have been massive protests over the past week about the current state. That hitting the 500,000 dead mark is going to inspire some people to expect some sort of change. And bear in mind, we've got next year an election coming. We've been talking about that recently. President Jair Bolsonaro has not been good on the pandemic. He called it a little flu, while refusing to follow or promote mask wearing, quarantines, and social distancing, despite having contracted the virus himself. He also encouraged large gatherings and disparaged vaccines. And I swear that paragraph is about Bolsonaro, not about Donald Trump, although every one of those facts is true, basically. Except with Trump, at least, the vaccines he disparaged were non-COVID vaccines. He seems to think you should take the COVID one at least. So, and by the way, in terms of international sporting events, last month, they announced that Brazil would be hosting the Copa America soccer tournament after Argentina said it would be too irresponsible to do it. It's worse in Brazil, they're going ahead. This could potentially have some effect, David, on the presidential election next year. But as of right now, at least, they are really suffering when it comes to COVID, and their government just doesn't really seem to care much.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction is my humanitarian empathy goes to everybody in Brazil, whether you're healthy or whether you're not. I mean, it is a horrible situation. It is terrifying. It was awful to see. I think the long view on all of this is that I think many years from now, people, particularly in political science, international relations, governmental studies, will look back and say, okay, there were several examples where incompetent leadership literally caused hundreds of thousands of people to lose their lives. And we're talking about democracies where there's incompetent leadership, not just Donald Trump in the United States, but Bolsonaro in Brazil. You can literally draw the connection now in both countries between a federal government, a federal response that is inept, that says, no, this isn't my responsibility. Everybody's on their own. Everybody, it's up to you to figure this out. It's up to states or provinces to figure this out. And that has been a disaster. And so there should be no argument about the connection now between competent leadership and how you prevent deaths in a public health crisis. And hopefully that's the lesson that we all take away from this and that generations will take away from this moving forward.
I hope so. It seems like a very small silver lining that at least if you preside over so many dead, you'll lose your job at least. So we'll see if that happens with Bolsonaro. We'll also see if you can potentially get the job back in a couple of years with Donald Trump. It seems like in a democracy, these sorts of things should matter, but we're gonna test that internationally over the next few years. That said, David, it has been a pleasure to have you on the program. That was a hell of a 90 minutes of news. Thank you so much.
John, thank you and appreciate everybody at TYT for including me. This has been great, a lot of fun and an honor to be on with you.
Great to have you here. Where can people see more of your content?
Rebel HQ on Facebook, YouTube, also as part of TYT. It's the channel where we put these videos up each day. Go to Rebel HQ and you'll see sort of my take in 3.5 to 4 minutes on some of the news of the day.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. And for those of you watching home, thank you so much for joining us. We got a big week planned for you, some fun guests. It's gonna be awesome, but the day is not over. In just a few minutes, if you head to youtube.com/indisputable TYT, Dr. Rashad Ritchie will be taking over. Gonna be having Gregg Daniel of HBO's True Blood and Insecure guest on the show today. Kenya Evelyn is gonna be the co-host. You got Benji Backer, a conservative host. He has been on a tear debating these conservative hosts. So there's a lot to look forward to. YouTube.com/indisputable_TYT. For my part, thanks for watching. And until next time, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and I'll see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Indisputable. We have a show for you today. Okay, we got a doozy with our I wish a Karen would. You ever ran across a Karen that just believes her job is just more important than anyone else's job? Well, I got parking lot Karen, and I'm gonna bring you parking lot Karen today. Also, in the bullpen, I have a guy who's a mixed bag in the bullpen. That is our infamous debate segment where we go back and forth about particular ideology. Well, this is going to be interesting because this guy actually is pro environmental solutions, and he is a hardcore Republican, holds various leadership positions in the Republican Party. This is going to be quite an interesting bullpen. But before I get there, let me bring your attention to a brother who is a TV, film, theater actor, director, has a remarkable background, and also was part of one of my most favorite shows of all time, True Blood. It was so damn addictive. Ladies and gentlemen, Gregg Daniel. Gregg, what up, homie?
My pleasure. I'm just laughing because you said True Blood, and it was such a gas to be on that show. I didn't get to be a vampire though. I wanted to be a vampire, but they just made me a minister. So what can I say? It was a fun show. I always
wondered. I said, man, what would happen if we have Reverend Vampire? And you know what I thought about? Remember the Eddie Murphy movie where he played a vampire and then had his preaching moment? I said that would be perfect to mimic.
That would be excellent. That would be excellent. Great imagination there. Great imagination, Dr. Richard.
Man, I appreciate you so much being on the show today. Let's talk about, you have some projects coming up, but let's talk about cancel culture, something that has been part of the narrative now for a while. And I think both sides of the political coin blame each other for engaging in too much cancel culture. Tell us your point of view as it relates to cancel culture.
I don't like cancel because somehow cancel is negative. There's something negative that, in some cases, and I realize it's difficult on both sides. We're sort of reassessing or reconciling these images that we are used to, or these truths we hold to be sacred, and they're not. I mean, there is a thing about trying to reconcile now. It seems to come on as cancel culture. We're going to cancel it, like Lin Miranda's movie. Well, there are not enough dark-skinned people, which there aren't, but it's going to be awkward. Cancel culture is, but it's many times it brings itself to a recognition of things that have stayed for a long time, And now that we're reconceiving that, it's hard to give up power. It's hard to give up perceptions. It's hard to be out there saying, okay, I've been thinking this way, but the right way is just, it's hard because people feel something is taking away from them. But I think it's just making us more aware, more sensitized, more sensitive to people. I don't call it cancel culture. It may sometimes go too far to the left. I'll agree. Okay, it feels like, wow, really? But look how much good it has done in terms of bringing to truths people who have been underserved and have been left out of haven't had a seat at the table, a piece of the pie. I think, all in all, when the smoke clears, it's good for our society. I do feel it's good for our society.
I look at people who have been quote unquote canceled, right? And I say, there are individuals who I believe deserve harsh criticism, and then there are others who deserve a lesson.
I agree.
Because I think when you engage, let's take racism for example. There are individuals, I believe racism exists on the spectrum. I believe there are individuals that no matter what you do, they will never be helped. They will never change their mind, and they will always be what's known as hyper-aggressive racist. And then there are others that have implicit racism or the internal racism that they can't even recognize, but given opportunity, they may have an opportunity to transform. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. In fact, there's an unconscious bias. There are those who think who call themselves liberal and will side on the environment and black lives. But however, there's an unconscious bias. There's some things that have been coded to us since we were kids in our society, in our community, or things that are coded. So you may not even, you think you might be liberal, but you may not be. You may not be because it's been comfortable. So yeah, there are unconscious biases that we have, and when you're called on it, naturally you get defensive. You want to put up that shield on that wall saying, no, I'm not that. But take a moment, just take a moment and look at the entirety of it. And yeah, there might be some things there that just like a lot of theaters now, I work in theater a lot of theaters are reconceiving. What is our season going to be like now? Do we have to have 5 white playwrights? Who is on our board of directors now? How do we really get education, diversity, and inclusion? So yeah, I think again, yeah, it's raising consciousness in many, many ways. And there are those who are soft, unconscious bias, but they need to be confronted about it as well. If any change is going to happen, Doctor.
Yeah, very well said. I want to get to your new project, but before I get to that, let me ask you about your longevity in the industry. You've seen everything. You've seen trending things. You've seen how Hollywood has changed its mind, so to speak, as it relates to black actors and actresses. Where are we at right now as it relates to inclusiveness of black and brown media personalities and actors and actresses in your profession?
Well, I'm going to go online. I'm going to go on book and say I think this is the most exciting time that I've been through. I do think so. I see people in positions now in my work that I've never seen before. And when I say people, I mean BIPOC, men, women, LGBTQ. I see people in decision-making positions as well that I've never seen before. Yes, it's awkward, it's slow. However, boards are becoming conscious now. They don't want to be on the wrong side of history. So now there are boards that are saying, how can we be more inclusive in our board? I think it's an amazing, exciting time. I've seen more women directors. I've seen more women filmmakers. It's an exciting time because more are coming through. And I think the events of 2020 with the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic we had has really shed a light on things in ways we never thought possible.
Man, I say something that's really politically incorrect, but people know what I mean when I say it. I say every board, I don't care how many white people you have on your board, you need a Tyrone in the boardroom.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean Tyrone in the sense it has to be a black male. I mean, you need diversity in that boardroom because that voice of diversity can stop your company from making a mistake like Gucci.
Absolutely. How are you ever going to become sensitized to issues you have no idea of? You've never had to consider because of your privilege, because of your power. You've never had to consider that. You do need a Tyrone to say, whoa. See, that might be, I see what you intend. I see what your intention is, but what you're not being sensitive to is how that might alienate black women or black mothers or black, you don't get that. You have to have that voice, or else you're flying blind. You're flying blind. So yeah, you do need that. In the decision-making positions, you have to have more BIPOC individuals. It's the only way.
Let's talk about your project, 7th and Union. To my understanding, this was shot during the height of lockdown, during the pandemic. So let's talk about the project and talk about how logistically you pulled that off.
Well, it wasn't easy. We were one of the first films that was greenlit to actually shoot during the pandemic. So we had a lot of protocols and procedures, everyone trying to be safe as possible. It was a little, when it comes to art, you risk a little bit, but we weren't risking. We had a COVID officer all the time with us. Beautiful story about a Mexican boxer, a black guy, myself, generations apart, but somehow in each other they can find the strength to go on, to move on in their lives. Two totally different races, two totally different generations. Beautiful movie. It's a boxing movie, but boxing is only the backdrop to what I think is a very unique friendship between a brown brother and a African-American brother.
I've heard this film has a whole lot of heart, brother. Can you attest to that?
It does have a lot of heart. It does. Well, just seeing two leads up there who are not Caucasian, just having two leads, two men relying on each other that's not Caucasian, just reframing that rather than showing them as divisive with each other, showing how they actually find hope in each other. I think that's a beautiful story to tell.
How can we watch it, brother?
It's going to be released. It's already played the Latino Los Angeles International Film Festival, and we expect it to be released next year. I'm not sure exactly when, but look out for 7th and Union. It's a beautiful and fun film.
Love it, man. How can people follow you, my friend, social media and elsewhere?
You can find me at Instagram at official Gregg Daniel. I gotta say GREGG. Don't leave out them G's, y'all. Official Gregg Daniel. Twitter at Real Gregg Daniel, and Facebook Actor Gregg Daniel. And I love to read things and hear from people. Love to.
Man, it's a pleasure, man. Very proud of your success. Thankful for the intellect you bring to the industry and the thoughtfulness you have about inclusion. Thank you for joining us.
I'm humbled by that. Thank you, Dr. Richie. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, we got more on the other side. It's indisputable.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive. And you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing, and thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
Senator Ron Johnson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this man is the definition of caucasity. Not audacity, but caucasity. If I had the kind of confidence that this man has right now, there's no telling where I would be in life. Senator Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin was the single vote out of all of the US Senate in 2020 to stop Juneteenth from becoming a holiday. And he really was the single vote that prolonged it in 2021. But he decided to just, change his mind. Now, the reason why he said he was against Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday was because it just costs too much money. Obviously, we cannot celebrate the freedom of enslaved individuals in this country because it just costs too much money to add that to the federal holiday list. Let me remind you, 47 states, including the District of Columbia, already celebrated and acknowledged Juneteenth. So you're really only adding 3 additional states, by the way. And let me also say this, I get it. We don't send politicians to DC to give us holidays. We send them there to give us policies. But damn it, it's still a good holiday. Now, Ron Johnson, the US senator that opposed it, eventually voted for it reluctantly, decided to show up at a Juneteenth celebration. Well, here's how that went. They said, we don't want you here. They booed him. He walked around the crowd as if he was the guy who made it happen, the guy who promoted it, and the guy who absolutely supported it. He did not support it. Now, remember, this crowd is a very diverse crowd. A lot of individuals coming together to celebrate this remarkable opportunity at coalition building. Well, Senator Ron Johnson comes there. The crowd becomes very irritated with his presence and they start to boo him. Good for them, by the way. Good for them, right? Now, here's what Ron Johnson, according to the HuffPost, said. Johnson was not pleased, complaining to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that his reception is, and I quote, not how to heal a nation. He blames them for being aggressive in their booing because he opposed some level of progression for black people in America. I love the fact that Representative David Bowen, and I gotta say this, Representative, this was petty, brother, but I like your style. Here's what Representative Bowen tweeted during this rally. Just in case the news doesn't report it, black residents booed Ron Johnson and ran his hypocritical ass out of Milwaukee. Hashtag Juneteenth 2021 celebration for claiming to support Juneteenth after previously voting against it. Gotta love America's holiday. Signed, Representative David F. Bowen. I gotta get that brother on the show. But before I get that brother on the show, I have with me the remarkable editor for Insider's Voice of Color, Kenya Evelyn, on the program. Kenya, good day, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Okay, this is kind of your neck of the woods right here. We got to talk about first the caucasity of Senator Johnson. I mean, he came strolling through there like he was a superhero, but in fact, he's a supervillain to that crowd. Explain this to me, I don't get it.
Well, I have to shout out the hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Whether it be the Milwaukee Bucks winning their series later on that evening, or it be the welcome, the Brew City welcome they gave Senator Ron Johnson that day, Milwaukee clearly won Juneteenth. But that's neither here nor there. I think what we see happening in Milwaukee, what we saw with the audacity of Ron Johnson, is what happens at the state and local level in terms of politics in Wisconsin all the time. Milwaukee is a convenient tool for people and Juneteenth events, which, like David Bowen was saying, a colleague of mine or someone I've interviewed many times, as he's been saying, he's one of those political leaders who's been out there every night with either the People's Revolution calling for racial justice reform or working and walking along with black men who are trying to curb gun violence in the city. These are the leaders who are there every day. Those are the leaders who are there at these Juneteenth festivals and Juneteenth celebrations that Milwaukee has been known for. And so when you have outside leaders who any other time are running counter to the racial progress that these very advocates are championing, and when you're running parallel counter to even the celebration of jubilation that is Juneteenth, it takes a lot of audacity for you to expect to show up and be revered once you arrive, and then admonish those who don't dare acknowledge you as some saving grace or some uniting force on their long existing event.
Let me tell you why I like what happened to Senator Ron Johnson. And you know this, being a member of the black community, like I am, we have played this we have been very courteous to politicians who have been adversarial to our policy progress in certain arenas. Let me give an example. The black church. Politicians routinely, Republican and Democrats, they will go into black churches during election time, even though they have represented or misrepresented the black community. But we have considered those opportunities to be sacred. We typically do not give any criticism. We allow them an opportunity to join us, to say what they want to say. I'm just tired of that. So him coming to this Juneteenth event, I think he was under an impression that maybe the crowd obviously would not agree with him on his ideological stance, but they would still be respectful enough not to polarize him in that way. I say polarize on, because we have to stop treating these individuals with kid gloves. I'm not for an insurrectionist type uprising. I'm not a terrorist, nor am I a terrorist supervisor or sympathizer. What I am is an individual who cares enough about policy to boldly say in public places, I disagree with your policy because you are a policymaker, and this is how I disagree with your policy, and I'm well within my constitutional freedom of speech to do it this way.
Absolutely. We're seeing the continuation of accountability that came from racial justice protests even last year. And Milwaukee is in a specific position where they can uniquely call out these very legislators. They were inundated by the early outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Milwaukee was an early hotspot. We saw the economic decline decimate cities across the Midwest disproportionately. And Black Milwaukeeans are not unique to that. In fact, the DNC last year, which was supposed to be a symbol or a catalyst for economic recovery, hit Black businesses in particular hard when it was canceled last year. And Democrats up and said, okay, well, we'll make it a nice little event at a convention center. And even there was speculation about whether there was anything happening in there. I mean, Milwaukeeans in particular have every more reason to say, what are you doing for our communities? Not just come election time, not just when you need our votes, as Milwaukee, along with Atlanta, along with Philadelphia, as we saw across the country, were instrumental in helping Democrats win certain states. But come back when it's time to talk about jobs. Come back when it's time to talk about the disparities in our educational systems. And that's exactly what folks out there who are challenging Ron Johnson are doing. And it's not just a matter of you are explicitly blocking legislation that would have acknowledged this day federally to begin with, but it's also where are you outside of these instances? The same way that Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in America, where just about any given moment you won't it will be hard pressed, except for along the lakeshore, to find white faces in the city of Milwaukee anyway. Don't parachute into our communities that you usually use the highway to avoid the other 364 days of the year. Don't parachute into them now to feign like bipartisanship or acknowledging our culture and our existence in this state that has long been there. Don't act like that's valuable to you now, when you've been willing to be the obstructionist that kept celebrations like this, celebrations that across the country is not only the largest, but one of the longest outside of Galveston. You didn't care to acknowledge throughout his more than 20-year history. Don't show up now.
Very well said, sister. Very well said. Ron Johnson, even outside of the context of the Juneteenth vote, is antithetical to policy that would help that same community. So they didn't just boo him because of Juneteenth. Those boos also included his policy stance for years on other items as well. Let me shift focus for a minute and talk about Father's Day. I had a great Father's Day weekend. I am a dad. I was able to get in some relaxation. It was cool. But the NRA, I saw this ad from the NRA, the National Rifle Association. They are the de facto lobbying wing for all gun manufacturers. That's what they are. They are not a constitutional rights organization. They are not a gun as a right to own organization. They are in fact a lobbying group. That's who they have devolved into. So over the weekend, in honor of Father's Day, they released a propaganda video. And in this explosive, and I mean that word intentionally, propaganda video, they featured an Arizona father-daughter shooting duo, right? Because this is obviously very, very important to them, with a pretty extreme ending. NRA members, Danny D'Angelo and his 17-year-old daughter, her name is Daniela, are seen firing a variety of guns, including some type of grenade at the end. And listen, I'm no constitutional scholar, but I'm pretty sure the bomb at the end is not included in the US Constitution. But it was the end of this propaganda commercial. Here's some of that. The entire context of this video is about teaching your children to protect themselves from whatever, right? They really don't provide any information other than that. We just need to teach our children to shoot, to kill, to blow things up because they need to get ready for war. War against who exactly? Now this was in Arizona, alarming data about gun violence in Arizona, where this whole gun violence thing or theme came from. Homicide, 2,195. Total number of gun injuries, 2,186. And the list goes on. This is from the Gun Violence Archive, 2014 to 2021, Arizona stats. From 2014 to 2021, there have been 2,195 deaths due to gun violence. If that's not bad enough, more than 20,000 total deaths, with just 600 of them being from self-defensive use. And this is all gun related. We have a gun problem in America where people equate gun and God to the same thing. Kenya, what are your thoughts?
I think it just speaks more to the same pandering, the same propaganda that is reminiscent of the NRA, their association with guns, with violence, with make somebody a man or masculine, which is why we're seeing that perpetuated on Father's Day, because apparently your ability as a parent is defined by your ability to remove the lives of someone else's child using a gun. I'm not quite sure here quite what the logic was, because if we're looking at how parents of other backgrounds are teaching their children to protect themselves, let's have conversations with Black fathers who at an early age have to teach their children how to interact with police officers if they may be pulled over or if they may be stopped with Skittles and an iced tea. We're having conversations from Latinx parents who might have to teach their children what to do if they're stereotyped as undocumented. We're having those conversations. Those are what fathers are doing. Those are what fathers, in terms of being leaders and advocating for protecting their children and protecting their children from the realities of what this country goes through. That is what fatherhood looks like. And so, if we're looking at the NRA, this is nothing more than the same propaganda that makes them puff up their chests and coddle to sensitive, white, fragile feelings that helps them realize that this is what it means to be American. The same way that you can't see an American flag without a Confederate flag or a drag race or Daisy Dukes, our country music. We have this one tunnel vision, and it usually is a means to exclude those who do not fit within that umbrella. But that they're speaking to exactly their audience, those who see Americans as one uniform, or fatherhood or manhood as one uniform ideal. And anyone who does not fit within that, those are the people that they're targeting. That's the who.
The ad says D'Angelo, who's the father in the ad, it says D'Angelo gets an A+ in parenting. That's what the ad says. He gets an A+ in parenting. Now, get the connection here. He gets an A+ in parenting according to this commercial, this propaganda, because he in fact teaches his white female young daughter to use a gun and to blow things up. That is the correlation to good parenting according to the NRA. However, I guarantee you this, if that would have been a Black father teaching his Black daughter how to shoot, how to blow things up, the narrative would have been that Black father is teaching his kids how to be thugs, teaching his kids how to be gangsters, teaching his kids how to be antithetical to the United States of America. And I promise you, the conservatives will say, this Black family, they don't love America. They are anti-American. You gotta understand the context here, because literally you have people that still receive the narrative of being patriots to this country, who say F this country on a regular basis, who say that they are actually learning how to shoot weapons for the reason of coming against the United States government. You have individuals who have already engaged in an insurrection against the United States government, and they still proclaim to be patriots of this country. And they will say that people like myself and people like you are anti-American when they in fact proclaim they are anti-American.
I think the same reason why we even have certain gun laws at the state and local level was in response to fears that Black Panthers were going to arm themselves. The same way we get concerns about gun safety when we're encouraging Black communities to arm themselves. I think we'll have a different discussion on the framing of the vitality, the safetiness of guns and our gun culture the moment that those who do not look like what we associate to be Americans are the dominant culture within it using them. And I think the moment that the NRA is finding themselves similarly to other leagues that have ICE or other organizations, sports leagues, other arenas that have excluded Black communities to their detriment, have excluded communities of color, despite the fact that we will soon be the majority across this country, the more you start seeing them shift that marketing to the very demographics that are going to keep organizations like them afloat while they're now claiming that they need bankruptcy protections, the more you see them beginning to pander to the very communities that will keep their revenue flowing, the more we'll see the conversation around gun safety change. Because the moment we start having those conversations about and being inclusive of anyone outside of the Americans that we envision or those who are their target demographic envision, the moment we'll see their rhetoric around gun reform change.
Yeah, it's actually a simple solution. If you want to see gun laws change immediately, have a mass production of Black people apply for gun licenses. If you do that, I guarantee you these laws will start transforming immediately. Hell, states will call emergency legislative session in order to start changing some of these gun laws. It is still interesting to me that people who are members of the NRA are continually tricked by the propaganda machine because many of them joined the NRA many years ago because they thought this was a real gun rights organization. But it is no longer that and hasn't been that for a very long time. And when you take a poll of the NRA, over 90% of its members, they actually believe in things like universal background checks. They believe that individuals with certain mental health disorders should not have access to weaponry. They believe in these concepts, but even though they are the members and they are dues paying members, the NRA represents something totally opposite to politicians. Why? Because the members, even though they pay a lot collectively, they don't pay nearly as much as the cats who are gun manufacturers paying the NRA to keep talking.
Now, I won't pretend to be an academic or insult your prowess, but we know the difference between believing something in theory versus practice. So we know that there is an NRA in theory, and we know that there are those who are members of the NRA in theory believing that this is supposed to be something that boosts the credibility of gun owners and boosts the credibility and the integrity of those who choose to be, which they have a right to be, law-abiding gun owners who carry and operate their guns legally and responsibly. But that's the NRA in theory, and we know in practice this is the organization that has pandered to those who care more about profit than integrity, who care more about revenue than credibility. And so if that means that we're willing to lift certain protections so that more guns can get in the hands of those who don't need it or should not even have access, if that means we're ridding ourselves of background checks, other barriers to get guns out of the hands of those who are dangerous with them, if that means that that is hindering our revenue and profits, we're willing to sacrifice our integrity and credibility for that. But thankfully, there are those within the NRA who are starting to wise up to that very propaganda. That the NRA they love in theory is not what they see in practice.
Very well said. We got more on the other side. Indisputable.
Came in late to watch TYT Old School, and I hear Cenk Uygur talking about napkins. Is this the kind of nonsense Anna Kasparian was talking about? Gotta love membership privileges. Gotta love them.
Please have Dave on every 4 episodes or so.
Watching Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur on Old School talking is exactly like watching Seinfeld and George. I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
Who's on Old School today? Is there one? At Dave Kohler. I hope it's not Brett Ehrlich.
This episode of Old School has killed me. Who knew a conversation about good and bad underwear could be so hilarious and relatable?
Couple things about this video. Dave Kohler looks so badass.
There's more than a 73% chance this Old School will be really funny. Cenk Uygur has been up since 4 a.m., so he's tired. Hence, everything will seem funnier to him. P.S. Remember, food talk, new words, and no or very little politics. I appreciate that all these people enjoy it because I know Cenk loves to do it, and he does it because he knows the fans love it too.
No, it's about more than just making glasses. We're talking about the right to see. Did you know that almost 1 billion people worldwide lack the access to vision correction like glasses? Billion with a B. Wow, that's 15% of the world. This is a real problem. Warby Parker thinks so too. That's why for every pair of glasses sold, they give a pair away to someone in need. Over 5 million pairs and counting so far. Yeah, that's great and all, but there's still a corporation. Is this just another PR distraction for questionable environmental practices? Climate change is what we still need to focus on. That's a great point, but actually Warby Parker is the only carbon neutral eyewear brand in the world. I really think you're burying the lead here. Oh, really? And what is that? These glasses look amazing. You do look really good. Stop. You look good. I don't think it can be overstated. Turn to the left. Other companies they make me feel underserved.
What is happening here? You guys, we got to go to break.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not seeing how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Dog on the White House lawn, would that be?
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change.
Welcome back to Indisputable. Let me read some of these amazing viewer comments. All right, we got a lot of them. Don't forget, make sure you always tune in to Indisputable TYT on the YouTube page, Indisputable TYT. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Indisputable TYT. All right, let's go to the members. Cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, says. If that was supposed to be about a father bonding with his child while teaching about gun safety and operation, it lacked any feature of the educating or safety aspect. It was basically a trailer for Taken 6 where the daughter learns her dad's specific set of skills. That's funny, I like that. Diana says, I work in the legal field and we're required to do unconscious bias training twice a year. It's truly eye-opening. We all bring bias to the table we aren't aware of. Agreed. YouTube, Mike B says, if it was a black father-daughter team doing this, the cops would have been called, though. Agreed. Non-human humanist says, shouldn't he be at work? After all, he didn't want it to be a holiday. Yeah, why is he not at work? He did not want this holiday. Ron Johnson, Travis Moore says, Ron Johnson trying to be a white savior to a T. Lawrence Wells says, I love watching Dr. R Squared, and I love the fact that you're all watching. The feeling is mutual. All right, Twitch. Gregg Daniel with all the G's is a class act. Yes, that comes from DOTMH. And Robert 1007 says, I need to get fashion advice from Dr. Richie. Looking sharp today. Well, take notes, my friend. Take notes. Sonic Boom Dragon 23. Kenya, a bunch of hearts and smiley faces. Good stuff. Ghost Dog TV, best host on Twitch, law student, teacher, and oh yeah, he's a dad. After the show, Dr. Richie is gonna stop a bank heist too. I did that last week, my friend. Welcome back. I still have my co-host Kenya. Kenya, I almost feel sorry for Mike Pence. Now, when I say almost, I don't actually mean that. So Mike Pence signed up for a job to be the vice president of what he knew would be the worst president in the history of our nation. He signed up to be vice president to a guy who was bigoted, who was sexist. See, we saw all of this during the campaign. He signed up for the job. He volunteered for the assignment. This did not happen after Trump became president. It was well known before he became president. So now that Mike Pence did not commit a federal offense and tried to overturn the election by not accepting the electoral college, right? The followers of Trump, because they are a cult, they turned on Mike Pence. Mike Pence has been trying to get his footing, political footing, ever since. Trump did this to him, yes, but in a way, Pence did it to himself. So Pence decided, hey, let me go speak to this conservative, religious, Christian, Republican group. By the way, once again, Christian, right? These are the people that are my base. These are the folks that wear the WWJD, what would Jesus do bracelets. I will be safe among my Christian brethren. Well, here's what his Christian brethren had to say about his speech.
And I want to thank my friend Ralph Reed for those overly generous words. I'm deeply humbled by them. And Ralph Reed knows me well enough to know the introduction I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. And I am honored to stand before you today.
Well, the crowd was saying traitor. So here's how it reads in your bio, sir. You're a traitor, Christian, Republican, whatever else, right? So they are calling him a traitor. And why are they calling him a traitor? Because Pence, who had to be basically rushed out of the Capitol because they were saying, we're going to hang you. Pence did not violate the law by overturning the actual election results. Let me remind you of what they, the same people, were saying about Pence back then. Well, things are looking up for Mike Pence because they're not saying hang Mike Pence anymore. So I'm glad things are looking up for him. They're just saying he's a traitor, which by every definition, it is probably better to be called a traitor than to have a mob of white terrorists looking for you to hang you, okay? Kenya, what is Mike going to do?
I mean, Mike Pence is a perpetual lesson in self-owning. I cannot offer advice for a man who, I mean, in the number of titles and the number of descriptors and adjectives he get, offered for himself, petulant small man might be one of them. I don't know, tomato, tomato. But in all actuality, I mean, this is those instances where you made your bed, now you lie in it. And essentially what we know is that Donald Trump forced other Republicans to he drew a line in the sand, and you're either with us or you're against us. And so what Mike Pence is continuing to try to do, as he did throughout his tenure, and emphasizing did, emphasis, did, what he did during his tenure as vice president, when he was vice president, was he tried to play both sides. He tried to look like the calming, reassuring voice for the frantic president. He tried to look at like the alternative to someone who was getting work done behind the scenes, like we knew Dick Cheney to be doing when he was vice president during the Bush administration. He wanted to look like the meat and potatoes, the things that got things done behind the scenes, and at the same time, the calming voice that could bring this country together. And when that line in the sand was drawn, and then we saw with other Republicans, whether it be Marco Rubio or we're seeing it with Matt Gaetz, they've shown their loyalties. Their loyalty is to a former president, knowing that he is still the face of a party. He's still the face that those within that party support, and that anyone who is looking to run or even looking to just keep their name in the hat for 2024 needs to stay on his good side. And where the vice president, former vice president, Mike Pence recognizes that he has to do that at the same time towing a line where this man threatened him. This man had his life on the line during an insurrection. And so while you want to acknowledge that you did your job, you did what you could do, playing the victim is what Mike Pence is really good at doing. You were bound by the Constitution to do your job. So now feel sorry for me that in the process of doing this, I got those to turn against me, but I'm for you. I'm still a Christian. I'm still a Republican. I'm still a conservative. Whatever adjective he wants to throw out there so that he is not taking the blame for being exactly what those Republicans who see that line drawn is showing him and telling him exactly what he is, and that's a traitor.
Yeah, and see, here's the thing. They don't give a damn about those other titles. They don't give a damn about the Republican title. They don't care about the conservative title, because in a cult, only one title matters, and that is your allegiance to the cult leader. And that is what you have seen happen in the progression of what took place after Trump got elected. This is now Trump's party. This is not McConnell's party. This is not the Republican Party. This is Trump's party, and he will continue to shape it as he sees fit, until or unless somebody inside of this tribal conflict, somebody stands up to him and is able to compete with him on some level. But right now, he's the guy slapping every Republican around as he wants to. Let me shift gears. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would. You know, we go across this country to highlight the detrimental Karens of the world. Well, this Karen, I'm going to call her parking lot Karen. She's obviously a very important person. She's so important that people who are doing work, people who are doing really important work dealing with gas, that's too much of an inconvenience for this Karen. She was really upset about these workers doing their job. Here it is.
We got a Karen.
Who do you work for? Instead of standing there looking stupid. Don't look at me, fat. Who do you work for? Is this your company? Huh? Is that your company? What are you doing? Why are all these cops here? What is so important going on here that you gotta hold all these people up? For what? You're on your phone, you're on your phone, and you stand there like a fat doing nothing. Nothing.
You got issues, man.
You have issues. You got issues. Why don't you find a real job?
Man, we work.
The worker is saying, ma'am, you have issues, and she clearly does. I didn't know parking cones were that serious. Obviously, her vehicle does not have the ability, like everybody else's vehicle, to simply drive around the parking cones and go to her destination. She must have a restricted vehicle, because these parking cones really made her upset about the work these men were doing. But that's not it. I want you to notice in this next video, the foot stump, because it's time for Karen to take a time out.
You can move these cones too.
Yeah, but we're dealing with gas,
man. You can put your phone down, because you know what? You don't do anything anyway. You're a waste of life.
Ma'am, we're working with the gas. We're fine. I mean, ma'am.
Are they okay?
Ma'am, we're working with gas. We're dealing with gas.
Are you okay?
It's in a.
Is everybody okay while you smoke your cigarette?
Hey, call Julio, fool.
These folks are dealing with gas. This is really important stuff. And they have to section off certain areas to make sure they deal with it safely and appropriately. But that doesn't matter to Karen. Karen called them, and I quote, a waste of life. This Karen also decided to start being aggressive and adversarial to bystanders who were asking the men, are you okay? Are you all okay? And then she taunts them for being reasonable. Fascinating. Kenya?
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression. Similarly, I guess when you're used to coddling, accountability, equal treatment feels like an attack. And so what we're seeing all across the country is right now, those who are used to being able to center themselves, those whose lives and livelihood are able and have been used to having precedent over others, we're seeing the very manifestations of those very uncomfortable realizations that just simply the world doesn't revolve around you.
Yeah. Let me get to another expression of extreme privilege. Now, you and I, Kenya, can agree that what happened on January 6th was in fact an insurrection against the government. It was in fact a terrorist attack against the Capitol. These individuals were domestic terrorists. They utilized criminality and violence in order to make a political point. That is your casebook statutory definition of terrorism. It fits 110%. Now, there are individuals who are being apologists for terrorists. Let's go ahead and call them what they are. They are terrorist sympathizers. That is who they are. Let's go to Fox News host Mark Levin. Mark Levin says January 6 rioters would be treated better if at Guantanamo Bay. In a June 13th episode rebroadcasted on Saturday, Fox News, Mark Levin claimed January 6 suspects are being treated worse than terrorists detained at Guantanamo Bay, additionally falsely claiming the charges against them have not been made public, which was a complete lie. Here's some of Levin's commentary.
What has happened exactly to the hundreds of people who were involved on January 6th? Some of whom broke into the Capitol building, some of whom were on the Capitol building steps, some of whom were on the Capitol building grounds. What has happened to them? We're supposed to be a republic. We're supposed to be a free country. We have a constitutional system. We have due process. Take a look at the Constitution. We don't have secret trials in this country. And yet, what has happened to these people? We get little spurts of information here and there from the 2 or 3 independent reporters, none of whom were associated with big media or big tech, who are bothered to look into this. What are we hearing? We're hearing that we have more FBI resources applied to this than to anything else. That people are being rounded up all over the country and being charged in some cases with misdemeanors. We have SWAT teams that are being used to collect people and bring them back to Washington. We're hearing that they're in some of the worst jails and that some of them are being put in solitary confinement where they only have an hour where they can go outside, if that. That they're being fed poor food. They're being treated like they're terrorists, and at Guantanamo Bay, where they'd be treated actually better.
I want to remind you that Mark Levin never defended nonviolent individuals who are black and brown currently in prison under unimaginable circumstances, even though whites who were convicted of the same crime were able to receive probation or take a very fluffy plea deal. He's not concerned about them. He's concerned about the terrorists. The only reason he's concerned about these terrorists is because not only are they white, but they also represent an ideology that he believes in. Kenya, your thoughts?
Khalif Browder served 3 years in prison without ever reaching trial for being accused of stealing a backpack. If we want to talk about the inequalities, if we're talking about the injustices that exist in our criminal justice system, folks who made a conscious decision to storm the grounds of the US Capitol to overthrow the US government in the midst of its transition of power is not one of them. And I know that network isn't typically rooted in fact or reality, but no amount of revisionist history can allow them to erase the lived experiences of a mostly black and brown city of Washington, D.C. that had to experience experience it. And knowing that I'm only 2 miles away from that Capitol, remembering what that felt for communities of color, Black communities in the DC area, to have helicopters over your house, to have the streets completely martial law in your own community, in your own street, for those who came from rural America or came from all over America, because they feel as though those of us who look like me, those of us who look like you, are taking over. You cannot erase those experiences, and no amount of revisionist history is going to negate that. It also doesn't negate that the data is showing us that there were far more police presence at Black Lives Matter protests throughout the year in 2020. What we saw at racial justice protests all across the country. And if we're really looking at, if we're really making a direct comparison to Guantanamo, we're looking at years of organized abuse, years of organized torture that received global condemnation, to the point that currently the current president of the United States, the very administration that the former and that those who congregated and joined up and tried to take over the US Capitol were trying to disrupt, they are now trying and adamantly trying to finally close that base. If we're really making that general direct comparison, let's really unpack the criminal justice system. But we're not talking about that for folks who actually care about when those of us who look like me and look like you, or look like Khalif Browder, as we know, they're not talking about those issues. They're not talking about the injustices that exist that allow people to stay behind bars without ever being convicted of a crime, because it's insincere and we know who they're peddling to.
Yeah, a few years ago, the Department of Justice released a study that said the greatest domestic threat is white supremacists becoming members of law enforcement. The reason why they said this was the greatest domestic threat is because, in fact, these white supremacists are terrorists. And they bring a terrorist ideology to a position of public trust. Now, Mark Levin says that is not a threat in this country. Here's more of what Mark said.
Part of what's going on here is the media and the Democrats and Biden want you to believe that this is part of a white supremacy movement. Neo-Nazis and Klansmen. It's not true. But if it is true, tell us, who exactly are the neo-Nazis and the Klansmen? None of us support them, but they use this phrase, white supremacy, to attack our entire society under this critical race theory. And so they move in and out of the language, move in and out of the definitions. It's white supremacists. It's the greatest danger we face in this country, according to Biden. Now, actually, those massive nuclear warheads that are aimed at our major cities by China and Russia, and the ones that Iran wants to get with the support of the Biden administration, that's the greatest threat we face, ladies and gentlemen.
That man is a damn shame, just as a human being. As a human being. On June 5th, the DOJ revealed that approximately 465 defendants had been arrested in connection to the attack, with more than 130 charged with assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers or employees, including 40 suspects who have been charged with using a deadly or dangerous weapon or causing serious bodily injury to an officer. That's just what they did to other police officers. And I guarantee you, these individuals did not act in silos. Listen, I'm flat out of time. We got the bullpen on the other side. Kenya, how can people follow you, sister? It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Sure, they can follow me on everything at Live from Kenya.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on Indisputable. All right, we got more. Stick and stay.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight. And that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen. Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Half Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
Let's look.
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay, this is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this.
Cheers to Brett Ehrlich.
Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome back to Indisputable. We got a lot of viewer comments. Let me read some of them. So thankful for all of the comments. Remember to always join me on Indisputable TYT on YouTube. Subscribe. All right, it's free, it's quick. Follow me on all social media, Indisputable TYT. Okay, let's go to Super Chat. That 01 Cobra says, really enjoying your show, Doctor. Always looking forward to the bullpen speaking the truth. Well, it's coming. Forrest Dudley says, Dr. Richie, can we rechristen you as the Indisputable Dragon next time you're on TDR? Of course you can. And I've been called so much worse than that. That is a privilege. I would love for you to rechristen me. All right, KFZ247 says, Brother Pence might as well hang it up. Yeah, he had a previous career as a broadcaster. He was a radio personality. He may want to go back to that. Stephen Miles Cook says, the Karenacity, that is a good one. Yes. Osiris XTV says, how could people be so mad, LOL? Hyper Vigor, her finger pointing is the scariest force on earth. Laughing my. Vitingale says, for the bullpen, thumbs up. Thank you. Dragon Penny, let's go to Twitch. Dragon Penny gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Kenny from Philly gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Thank you. Kenny from Philly resubscribed. 13 months, still going strong. And Elder Mind Pulse has resubscribed, tier 1 for 6 months. Thank you. Tempo Dan 918. Wow, her arms turned red. She was yelling so much. Yeah. Okay. Crix AK, I don't know, Krizak maybe. Imagine a world where we all were like Dr. Richie. One can dream. Well, damn, that's a high compliment. I don't know if that will be a great world, but it would definitely be an interesting one. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what just happened. Okay.
Well, hang on, we're gonna reconnect really quick. We gotta start the call over, go to Slate Skip.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a slight technical issue. Welcome to the Bullpen. On the Bullpen today, I have Benji Backer, president and founder of the Conservative Coalition. Now, I must say this guy is a real mixed bag because he's pro-environment and a conservative, and we're going to talk about all of that. Benji, good day, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And I love being described as a mixed bag.
Well, you know you are, and I actually appreciate that because I think politics works best when there's nuance. And what we have seen in both parties is this moving away from nuance to this tribalism of corporate politics on both sides. So let's talk about something we agree with. We actually agree on environmental justice. So I want you to give me your environmental justice stance, and let's chop it up and see exactly where we agree and where we differ.
Well, absolutely. And first, let me explain this. Almost every American is a mixed bag, even if we don't give ourselves credit for it. We have way more convoluted and different views than what the Republican and Democratic party system would make us think. We don't always have overlap with one party or another. And that's why I see myself as more conservative, but I also have views that are seen as quote unquote liberal. And I think most people either fall one way or the other in that category. On the environment, environmental justice, I do believe that environmental issues disproportionately impact those who are in low income and minority communities. It's the hardest hit communities, and those communities aren't able to adapt as easily to the issues of climate change and other environmental degradation. So I think as a society, what we need to do is make sure that in our policies, environmental justice is always part of how we move forward on environmental issues. If we are going to change a sector of the economy in an area where environmental justice is a really big problem, how can the low-income people be a part of that conversation? How can we train them and make sure that they're ready for the workforce in that new sector that's being created if there is a transformation? So I actually don't know if there would be a ton of disagreement there. And I think that as a younger conservative-leaning person, a lot of my peers would agree.
Let's talk about it. It's beautiful what you just said, and I appreciate you saying that. Let's talk about the reality of the politics involved. I agree with you 100%, and I've been saying this for years. The reason why we, especially in the Black community, the reason why we should look at environmental justice as also civil justice is because of what you just described. It actually impacts our communities quicker, and the impact is even more severe. And we have seen this happen over and over again, from the city of Flint to environmental issues happening in urban communities without any real remedy. But Republicans, your colleagues, are typically the ones who are antithetical to legislation that would really take this issue seriously. So let's go to the Green New Deal. That was massive. That was a massive idea, right? What were your thoughts about the Green New Deal?
Well, look, the Green New Deal might sound good, but it is simply just an idea. There is no policy substance behind it. There are only goals and aspirations. There's not an actual path of getting there. The reality is environmental issues, specifically climate change, which the Green New Deal is supposed to tackle, is a global issue. We need all countries involved. We need all industries involved. We need all individuals involved. The Green New Deal doesn't include the rest of the world. There's nothing that is replicable in the Green New Deal to other countries. And on top of that, it's not feasible here in the United States. Because there's no policy behind it, there's nothing that you can actually pass to make a difference on it. And on top of that, the limited policy that they do have, which is basically mandating 100% wind and solar, isn't possible. It isn't something that we can do here in the short term. And right now, it doesn't seem like it's something that we can do in the long term as well. We need to be having a conversation about all energy sectors. We need to be having a conversation that includes local government, state government, the federal government, and companies. And it just doesn't do that. It's very one size fits all or nothing, boom or bust. And we can't have that if we're hoping to fight climate change.
Let me tell you why I disagree with you fundamentally. I definitely understand your point of view about the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is what we call a political framework, where it lays out agenda, it lays out a goal, and it goes full throttle. Here's what that means. They are asking for 100%. They're saying these are the conclusions. These are the outcomes that we can achieve, right? So maybe you don't agree with the full outcome. Maybe you don't agree with 100% wind or solar, et cetera. That's fine. You don't agree with that outcome. But maybe you agree with 75% of it. Maybe you agree with 60% of it. And I think what has happened in this conversation about the Green New Deal has not been genuine across the political aisle. And I know you're a smart guy, so I want you to understand it from a different context. The Green New Deal is not a policy. You are correct. A policy is a social contract between the community and government, codified in statutory language, typically known as legislation. That is not what it is. The Green New Deal is a framework piece. And that framework did exactly what it was supposed to do. It got you talking about it. It got me talking about it. It got Republicans talking about it. It got Democrats talking about it. And because of that framework, you have more conversation around environmental change and environmental justice than ever before. But it took a massive framework like the Green New Deal to spark that dialogue. But what has happened, brother, is that many on your side of the aisle decided not to be genuine about the conversation of climate change and denied the actual science connected to climate change. And that's one thing the Green New Deal does. It adheres to and respects the science that's well established about climate change, while people on your side of the aisle, brother, they say the science is not settled.
Well, I have to completely disagree with that. first, with your explanation, that does make sense. I mean, look, we are talking about the Green New Deal, and that means that we're talking about climate change. But talking isn't good enough. We need to be starting to take steps in the right direction to fight climate change and actually acting, not just talking about it. There have been over 24 bipartisan climate policies in Congress over the past couple of years. AOC and the other Green New Deal folks have not gotten onto one of them. They haven't gotten onto any of them because they said they don't go far enough. Well, the reality is inaction is the least amount of action that you can get, and steps in the right direction on bipartisan policies that are sensible is at least a step in the right direction.
Okay, let's talk about that.
There are Republicans in Congress who have their own climate plans, who have passed the biggest investment in climate change policy of all time in December that we don't talk about. And that's a legacy that is starting to be created.
Let's talk about what we know of the Republican Party. We know that you just talked about the globalized nature of climate change and how we have to be part of a global infrastructure. I agree with you. But your Republican president said we do not need to be part of that global infrastructure. And then somehow he got those same Republicans who voted on some climate justice bills to agree that we did not need to be part of a global conversation or be part of a global remedy or global solution as it relates to climate change. Don't you find that to be politically schizophrenic when you have one policy saying we need to be part of a dynamic solution in a global context, and then you have the leader of your party saying we do not?
Well, first of all, the leader of the Republican Party for the past 4 years is one person. There are hundreds of elected federal Republicans and thousands of elected state-wide Republicans, and even more at the local level. Those folks have been leading on climate change over the past 4 or 5 years because of our organization, the Conservation Coalition. That is progress. And despite what the president says, and despite what he peddled in some of the debates and that sort of thing, emissions continue to fall.
Now, are you talking about the current president or Donald Trump?
I'm talking about Donald Trump. He talked about how climate change wasn't.
We really, let me just say this, brother, for the sake of the show. Because of the rhetoric around him, let's refer to him as former president, because he still thinks he's the president, and a whole lot of Republicans still think he's the president. So thank you. Okay.
The former president, who talked a lot about how climate change wasn't real, did a lot of damage to the Republican Party's legacy on climate change for the past 4 or 5 years. But I don't think that should overshadow the hundreds of Republicans who aren't Donald Trump, who have been leading on climate change over the past 4 or 5 years. There has been an immense movement within the conservative movement. And on top of that, I don't have a problem with the United States seeing the Paris Accords as not a great answer. The reality is a lot of scientists who are climate scientists on the IPCC and UN advisory committees also don't agree that the Paris Agreement does absolutely anything to further the climate change conversation. So I don't think that we should be basing whether or not conservatives are going in the right direction based off of one person or one international agreement that doesn't do anything to lower emissions.
Let me tell you why I disagree with that. Donald Trump, while he's one man, represented the most powerful seat in the land. So you do have to consider what his policy agenda was. That former president took y'all back, brother. I mean, let's just be authentic about it. Can you say right here on my show that former President Donald Trump took y'all back? And I'm talking about people like you who actually know, listen, we need to take care of the planet. We're Republicans still, we're conservatives, but we still need to take care of the planet. Would you not say boldly, listen, that man took us back on that idea?
I would say that while he refused to take action on climate change, the rest of the conservative movement continued to go forward. Like I said, there were dozens of Republicans who passed climate policies during his time as president. So I don't like to focus on one person.
Did Trump
I'm a
sign them into law?
In federalism.
I believe in Trump signed them into law? I got you. Did Trump sign them into law?
He absolutely did.
He signed all of those pieces of legislation into law?
He signed the ones that were passed into law.
Okay, so if he signed all of those pieces of legislation into law, and we still have you all being slow to the table as it relates to environmental justice, then one would argue that what was passed into law was really a watered down version of environmental justice and not the true environmental justice that you were looking for?
Well, look, I mean, change doesn't happen overnight. These were steps taken in the right direction just 6 months ago. I mean, the biggest investment of climate change technology in U.S. history was passed in late December 2020. I mean, we're just seeing the first inklings of this bill in real life right now. But the reality is, environmental justice is not a partisan issue. Conservatives, liberals, old people, young people overwhelmingly agree that environmental justice is something we need to tackle. And despite what the former president says about climate change, it really is irrelevant at this point because there are conservatives in Congress, in state legislatures, people like me leading the charge, thousands of our activists who are pushing for environmental action across the country, and yet we're still talking about Donald Trump. Instead of talking about how we can solve climate change, which is a very important conversation that we must have, I'm on the show talking about a former president. And the reality is we need to be looking forward. We need to stop looking back. We need to stop saying, oh, well, there were 30 years ago, conservatives denied climate change in a way that was really abysmal. And then you had a president 4 years ago. Like, no, we're in 2021 and there are Republicans and Democrats who want to pass climate policies. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about 2021. A recent poll that was done showed that roughly 15% of Republicans believe that climate change or the issue of the climate is a major issue in America. Compare that to roughly 85% of Democrats. Now, they didn't come to that conclusion on their own. And this is why I want you to realize how important it is that your leaders are in unison with your agenda. That 15% was a drop from 32% before Trump ever became president. Before Trump became president, 4 years before that, it was closer to 48%. So literally, Republicans have been going the wrong way. And I'm not talking about the leadership class, brother. I'm talking about people who vote for Republicans. Now, you don't think that they have been influenced in the opposite direction of the education that you're speaking of by the same leaders that you're defending on the show?
Well, look, there are two problems that exist within the conservative movement right now when it comes to fighting climate change. The first is that there is a huge generational divide. Younger conservatives prioritize this issue far more than their elders, and over 90% of young conservatives want action on climate change. That's the generation that I'm a part of. I'm actually an old Gen Zer, as surprising as that might seem. And Donald Trump did put the party back in a way on climate change because of what you just talked about, a decreased involvement in the climate change conversation, particularly with older Americans. But what also contributed to that was something like the Green New Deal, which comes out as an assault on people who live in middle America, who work in industries that would be directly impacted by the Green New Deal. And they're basically told, oh, well, you should just figure it out and get a new job, and we don't really care about it. We're just people from New York and Boston and Seattle, where I live, and San Francisco, and we're going to tell you what to do in the middle of the country on behalf of climate change. Of course they're not going to want to engage on climate change. So it's really twofold. Having a president that talks about it as a hoax is a problem, but so is a radical policy that doesn't include the majority of this country in terms of geography.
See, Benji, you don't get to do that, brother. You just said it was not a policy, and now you're citing it as a policy on the same show. You just proclaimed it is not a policy.
They claim it as a policy.
But it is, sir, it is a framework. It is a political framework. We have established that. You have acknowledged that. You said it was not a policy in the beginning of the show. You can't now claim that it's a policy when it fits your argument or narrative. So let's be authentic.
I said it came across to those people as a policy that goes against their values. And that's how it's billed. It's not billed as a framework. It's billed as a policy. It's not a policy, but it's billed as one. And there are people in the middle of this country who feel incredibly attacked by this one size fits all quote unquote policy that is supposedly supposed to fight climate change, but also take away their livelihoods, which is what it would do if it was pursued.
If it was pursued, let's talk about the Green New Deal for a moment, then I'll go to something else. If it was pursued, definitely you would have to be thoughtful about implementation. And nobody said this could be implemented overnight. As a matter of fact, those that support it even say it will not be implemented overnight. It would have to be implemented by way of process. And you already know this, many Democrats, especially corporate Democrats, they were adversarial to the Green New Deal. They decided to distance themselves from the Green New Deal, which I thought was a mistake. I still think it was a mistake because there were elements in the Green New Deal that should have been talked about on a more mainstream level, because without the conversation, you never spark the innovation necessary to get us to the space of environmental justice, real environmental justice. If you do not have a hardcore, no compromise attitude about environmental justice, you know what's going to happen, Benji? Corporate players who have won time and time again the argument of environmental justice, those corporate entities will continue to win at the end of the day. You know and I know the fight for environmental justice is not just a political one, but it is a fight against corporate interest, right?
I would say that if you believe in fighting for environmental justice, as I do, then the last thing that you should be supporting is the Green New Deal. Because the Green New Deal will not happen. There's no policy within the Green New Deal framework that has been actually pursued. It is simply a framework. It's been a framework for multiple years. And if you want environmental justice to be solved in this country, you put forth policies that actually move us forward.
All right,
and not frameworks that are just a divisive piece of rhetoric to win political points.
Come on now, wait a minute.
That's what it is.
You literally in this conversation have already agreed with some of the dynamics codified inside of the Green New Deal. You have agreed. It doesn't
matter when there's no progress being made under the guise of the Green New Deal.
The conversation of truth always matters, even if most people do not see it on your side of the aisle. I expect you to be an individual who can look at the nuance of the Green New Deal and say, these are areas where we actually agree. These are dynamics that we agree.
There's no nuance within the Green New Deal.
Do you agree?
There's no nuance.
Okay, I ask you a question. Do you agree that we need more solar and wind energy in the United States? Do you agree with that concept or not?
Yes, I do.
That's in the Green New Deal.
No, because there's no nuance in the Green New Deal. It is just a bunch of ideas.
You get my point. That's in the Green New Deal. That is a point of agreement. And the only reason why you oppose it, Benji, is because it has been politicized so much that it becomes, the word becomes this great evil to where you don't cite any of the language of the Green New Deal. You just say Green New Deal.
I oppose the Green New Deal because there has been no progress made on the Green New Deal at all since it was introduced. They keep reintroducing. Are you gonna let me finish a point, or
sure?
I mean, you keep shutting me down.
We got a couple of minutes. The conservative climate change movement. Explain that.
Well, look, I believe in climate action, not climate rhetoric. And the Green New Deal is climate rhetoric. And the conservative climate change movement is there to provide actionable results with whoever on the left wants to be a part of it. We've been building a grassroots movement across this country of mostly young conservatives who believe in climate change and want to take action. And we've been working with left of center groups to make actual policies pass. And we've actually gotten stuff done since we've launched.
Yeah, and just so you know, the Green New Deal, elements of that Green New Deal have been adopted by major city mayors like Mayor of Atlanta, LA, New York. It has also been adopted by various states, elements of the Green New Deal, and they have actually given the Green New Deal credit for adopting that. So when you say that no policy has come out of it, out of this framework, that is simply incorrect. While we are slow on the legislative side federally, there has been an adoption of the policy in multiple jurisdictions across the United States. Benji, I'm flat out of time. My producers are telling me to wrap it up. Brother, it's been fun. I appreciate you coming on the show. And tell people how they can follow you, man.
All right, well, I appreciate having the opportunity. Always good for a lively dialogue. We need more of it. I'm at Benji Backer on Instagram and Twitter. Hope to be on again and hope to have more of these conversations in the future. That's what we need.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being on Indisputable. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of the planet. And remember, the truth is always indisputable.